That's the view of my.
You're live.
We are live again here on Wednesday, March 18th. Now my phone's lighting up. So we are back on the conversation related to the local options tax and the pilot fund that we've had for multiple sessions. Damien has made our legislative council is making the language change suggested, and I guess I would like to see it if we could and explain it to us.
And could you make me a co-host again, please?
You understand?
Okay. So what I'm pulling up on the screen here, the highlighted portion would say that, so our prior language provided that in any year where the option tax revenues that are deposited in the pilot special fund exceed the full amount of the pilot payments made and the grand list stabilization payments made, which are subchapters 4 and 4C, and subchapter 4 includes correctional facility payments. That was the prior language. 1/2 of the remainder would be dedicated to town highway aid. This adds plus any amounts appropriated from the pilot special fund to the Department of Taxes for expenses related to grand list and appraisal assistance. And so this year, that is the 3.4 million that was discussed in Ted's presentation yesterday. So that would add this to the amount that you now have to exceed. So based on the projections in Ted's proposal yesterday, you're looking at between 300,000 and 400,000 more in revenues projected next year than the total of these amounts. And so you'd be looking at 1/2 of that next year. If grand list revenues continue to increase and these amounts don't increase as quickly, then you can see additional amounts in the future, or in the event that amounts are not appropriated from the pilot special fund for the grand list and appraisal assistance. So if that goes back to being a general fund or another fund appropriation, then you would see an additional amount equal to roughly 1/2 of what that was. So next year, that would be 1.7 million. That could be more or less in the future, depending on what the amounts are. But so that basically provides that whatever is over and above that in revenues, you would take back or have 1/2 of it dedicated to town highway aid, which would be over and above the base appropriations for town highway aid, and not affect the inflator or put additional demands on the transportation fund in out years if this money is not coming in, for example, during a recession or something like that.
Other questions specifically? Otherwise, I'll make a comment that this money, this activity, this 3.4 is in the governor's recommend. It's been presented in other communities. It's out there. It's a battle that's already being waged. I don't know where that's going to end up. Our goal, my goal in the committee has been find incremental help for towns, and I would like to see it be significant more. And I like the direction of the committee members who say we should have all of it. It should be 100% as given by the rural caucus. I think it should be, we should put a stab in for the surplus as well. But to drive this committee's discussion, drive the discussion further to make sure that it has a legitimate shot to get through the next 2 committees that it's got to even get to the floor. I'm on board with the suggested language that the vice chair added, and I think it's a somewhat of a recognition of the political realities, while we tend to be the ones to fight for the towns in their highway budget. And I think it's an acknowledgement of the reality of where things are at and our effort to incrementally improve things. I don't like it. And I don't like it, as much as I would like it to be where it was. But I think it's the reality of what we face. And that's, I'm looking for feedback, discussion, or a vote. Represent what?
I feel like the language is putting in statute this practice going forward, which I don't know, I don't love. I acknowledge the political complexity. But I guess I would personally feel better about not putting that explicit language in there. With the assumption that we are drawing attention to the pilot fund and the surplus, and that this money really needs to go back to towns for town highway aid.
Well, I mean, we're received, like I said, I clearly hear what you're saying, but I think just where we are today, you know, Wednesday, March 18th, the appropriations committee will be basically voting their bill out, or at least doing at least a straw poll this Friday. And there's yet been, from our brief time during the break, hasn't been any indication that they are not on board with this recommendation for the governor's piece. So it sounds like that decision has been made. So whether we agree with it or not, it seems like that's been taken care of. So if we're trying to get something seriously for, you know, seriously being considered, I don't think you can go against sort of like a argument that's already been quote unquote settled. If we want to get something paid. And, but I don't think they'll give it that much, you know, consideration, because there's, you know, but, you know, I'm just trying to give us the best, you know, path forward, which, you know.
So I guess I look at it as the governor's recommend is in there, and we are not disputing that. But so I guess the question is, do we assume that the governor's recommend is not just for 27, but going forward in perpetuity, or do we assume that it's for FY 27?
We've been indicated it's in there,
Okay.
you know, that. Yeah, you know, like I said, I'm not saying I agree with or disagree with it, that's just the reality that we're in today.
Yeah.
You know?
And you feel like if we didn't have that specific language protecting pilot funds for the reappraisal, that we would have less chance of getting our 50%.
I'm saying that we're facing an uphill battle with or without this, each uphill battle to get this. This would be, I don't say a death blow, but it just, yeah. You know, so you try to massage it, or, you know, maybe we'll just let them do it. I just.
The other option is to leave it out and have them force them to cut it out, or cut the whole.
Yeah.
That's really the battle.
Yeah.
That's the really, they put it in and hope that they will move forward with some help for the town highway, or leave it out and risk having the entire concept cut out, is what I think that our assessment of the situation. And that's where the committee is gonna have to make a recommendation, or make a vote, or make a change. Is that's what I think everybody's clear on where we're at. That's what we think is the case.
And I suppose if we didn't keep that language in there, that the money committees could put it back in. I mean, they could.
If it's not in the T-bill, they're not going to add, I've never seen them add that to, do anything like adding something like that to the bill. Adding additional expense to
Or
the
amendment.
version to a bill, or a change in money without the policy committee putting it in there, I don't believe that would happen. If you don't have it in, it's not gonna get added, I guess. President
I think we should proceed and stake our own ground out and because you know that if you don't take care of yourself, no one's gonna take care of you except your mother. And she's not here anymore.
with or without acknowledging that appraisal money.
With or without. Okay, I've got two minds of that. First off, there's nothing to say that that can't expand, so it takes more. Can also contract, but I've never, don't probably see that very often. So, and it's part of the budget this year. We're gonna have to put it in there. I mean, it's gotta be there. Going forward is the question, is what you're asking me. I just, that also is a need, and I would say that we should leave it in.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in? All right. We're good? No? That's where we're at. You move with this,
Yeah, I mean, to move things forward, I'll make a motion to, if you don't want to pull up the language there, to, include the, buys. Language, including the, reappraisal, like, not the, I don't remember that says, what's it say? To include plus any amounts, it's right in front of you,
There, I know,
yeah.
but it's not just.
So I mean, I make a motion to approve the language that's up before us on the screen.
Yeah, I drafted this on the fly, so there's not a document on the website right now.
Okay, for those in favor of including it in the language, thumbs up. Okay. Those are not, I guess would be thumbs down, so. We will ask you to include it in the draft that we'll be reviewing later today, move it into the T-bill. With that, we're gonna move over to mileage-based user fee language with Patrick Murphy and Damien.
Should I put the duct tape on my mouth?
Yeah, good idea.
I think I have a phone call. But in fairness, and yes, it's certainly been we're not all the way through it yet. I don't have an electric vehicle, and that doesn't mean that I don't want it to be the best setup possible. So, yeah, we may have to move on some of the areas that aren't fully settled. There's 9 months left to get this program ready to go. It is a first of the kind in the country. There's programming and pieces that have to go. Our job is to make sure that we have a framework that they can operate, that the agency can operate with the Department of Motor Vehicles and their effort to get it to an implementation place. They're going to continue to work on it. It's going to go from here. It's going to go to the Senate. It's going to potentially come back to us at some point. We need to have a framework that they can keep operating and moving towards the implementation. I am not suggesting that we don't want the language to be perfect, but I don't know if we can do perfect on a first-time program and a first-time implementation. But we need to make sure that they have the law that they need to work the building of the program in between. And I am all for the idea of having them come back to the committee regularly and update us all the way through the very end of when we adjourn the last week of April. Or somewhere near that, somewhere. But, and they're going to continue to work on it all the way through, and we can look at it at spots. But it is going to be evolving, and I suspect there'll be recommended changes when we come back, or those that do come back in January, because it is a developing program. But let's see what we can do for making progress on the current version of mileage-based user fee and pick up where we left off last time we're working it. Patrick's here. Last Friday, we didn't get very far, but we need to pick up and keep working on it. At least from now until we break for lunch.
Okay.
We're not done.
Draft number is 4.1. Is that available on the website?
Yes,
Yep, good.
Oh,
Okay.
it's under Friday.
Yeah, last week. Yep.
Time travel, huh? That here?
All right. I don't remember how far we got on Friday. I know it wasn't very far, but why don't I start from the top and I'll try to move fairly quickly. Okay. So starting from the top of draft 4.1, the first changes were in the definition of mileage reporting period. We took out the reference to the pay-as-you-go program in this definition and just explain that payment later on.
What page are we on, Jamie?
I'm sorry, that was on page 2. On page 4, I've made some technical corrections here. So at the conclusion of each mileage reporting period for a battery electric vehicle enrolled in the pay-as-you-go mileage-based user fee program, the commissioner would determine the actual miles traveled during the mileage reporting period, whether they were greater than or less than the miles reported during that period. And this is reflecting that in the pay-as-you-go program, you'll make intermittent reports of your mileage, but you're actually being trued up every mileage reporting period. So when you get your car inspected, they true up that mileage and either credit you or assess you, credit you for overpayments or assess you a balance due. The next change on page 4, line 15, I left out the word "be," so I've added that in. For newly registered vehicles, and I think this is as far as we got last time, the mileage-based user fee for newly registered vehicles. If you're registering for the first time, you can either elect to opt into the pay-as-you-go mileage-based user fee program if that's available. And then if you do not opt into that program, you would be assessed an estimated mileage-based user fee equal to the rate multiplied by the annual vehicle miles traveled for a pleasure car, which is roughly $154 at the present time. The fee would be provided or paid as provided in subdivision A3, which means that you have the option of lump sum monthly or quarterly payments of that amount. And then at the end of your first mileage reporting period, you do a true up. And again, if you overpaid, you get a credit against your future payments. If you underpaid, you're assessed an additional amount due.
Representative Coe?
So if I sell my car, and I don't buy another vehicle or anything, and I have a credit, will that credit be applied to my DMV fee going forward? Or if I've sold the car, will I get a check back for that credit?
That is a great question. I would defer to the agency on this one.
Thank you. For the record, Patrick Murphy, State Policy Director of the Agency of Transportation. In those limited circumstances where a credit couldn't be applied to the next balance, then a refund would just be issued.
To get a refund? Okay, it's I wouldn't have a balance sitting there in DMV for other DMV things.
So the point of having the credit system is that every time DMV has to issue a refund, no matter what the actual amount, there's a significant cost to it. And so we want to limit those circumstances in which we do that, but there are going to be things that, you know, what mid-year sale is one of those where you're settling at the point you get an odometer reading for the bill of sale, and then you're reconciling at that point and issuing a refund.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
And I will, if you decide to add this to the T-bill today, I'll add language that just provides, in the event of a terminating event, the commissioner, if there's a credit due, the individual, the commissioner shall issue a refund, something like that, just to address that. Let's make a quick note. I just need to. Okay. The other changes in here are just cross references that we're missing. And you'll see I broke things out into new subdivisions there as I renumbered. Calculation of the mileage base user fee. Instead of saying mileage reporting period, it now says the applicable period. Just to reflect that there are interim periods for the pay-as-you-go program and overall mileage reporting periods. And then it explains how that's calculated for a mileage reporting period and then for a report filed by an owner as part of a pay-as-you-go mileage-based user fee program. Providing that in that case, it's the difference between the current reported mileage and the most recent prior reported mileage. The reports for terminating event here, it was identified last week during one of our testimonies that we'd forgotten to mention how quickly after a terminating event you need to report your odometer reading. And so this says in the time and manner required by the commissioner, allowing the commissioner to kind of set that and adjust it as necessary. For the failure to pay fee when due and interest, this title changed because the penalty assessment that was in here was taken out. And so subsection B was renumbered because we eliminated the old subsection that was in the middle that assessed a 5% penalty for every 30 days you were past due. And added in a cross-reference to subsection A. In the failure to file report, so if a commissioner is unable to determine the annual vehicle miles traveled because a person failed to file a report, so for example, an odometer reading, or failed to have their vehicle inspected as required, and that I realized was left out of the earlier draft. So this allows the 98th percentile mileage assessment if you don't go and get your annual inspection to have your odometer reading done. The next changes in here from the prior draft all the way down on page 14. This is the transition language. So mileage-based user fee in the transition. So for current electric vehicles that are registered in Vermont, they would transition to the mileage-based user fee as follows. So for a vehicle that will not complete its first mileage reporting period prior to the next renewal of its registration after January 1 of next year, the owner or lessee may, at the time of the registration renewal, elect to pay an estimated mileage-based user fee. And it should say shall. At the time of the registration renewal, either elect to pay an estimated mileage-based user fee, or if available, opt into the pay-as-you-go, because this would indicate that you don't have to do anything. That the may would change to a shall, and that's what that comment is noting there. And then if you will complete your first mileage reporting period prior to the next renewal of registration, you would receive a credit of $89 from the current EV infrastructure fee that owner is paid towards the amount of the mileage-based user fee due for that initial mileage reporting period. So in other words, you do a 2-year registration sometime this year. You've paid your 2 EV infrastructure fees. Your next inspection in 2027 would start your mileage reporting period. And then in 2028, presumably before your registration renewal is due, you get your assessment of your first mileage-based user fee, and that will include a credit for that $89 for the second year of the EV infrastructure fee that you already paid, and allow for that transition at that point. And there, with the way this is set up, there are going to be folks who come out a couple months ahead as this transition goes, but it will save the administrative requirement of figuring out a month-by-month prorated credit for each person. Because you will have folks who might have part of that $89 that they paid overlapping with a reporting period if their registration renewal occurs before the reporting period is over. But the current proposal here would simply say we're not prorating unless you have a full year of credit. And then so you'll have winners and losers under this transition proposal, but administratively it's the simplest. So that's the proposal that's in. It's up to you whether you move forward with that. That's AOT's proposal here, is to do the simple administration with this to avoid problems trying to assess the exact amount.
Yeah, I get trying to simplify it. Can you describe what the worst case would be in this situation where you paid the registration, the infrastructure?
The worst case would be where my first mileage reporting period ends 1 month after my registration renews. And so I've 11/12 of the $89. I'm missing out on that. So that could be about $80.
Doesn't seem fair.
So there are other potential approaches, but it becomes a policy question for you as to how you would want to prorate it. If you decide that that's the direction you want to go in, and I'd encourage hearing from the agency too on that, because I can't comment on the administration that would be required to implement.
I get that it does add complexity, but it seems like a simple calculation, $89 divided by 12 at that much per month, full month. Because if I just paid the $89 and then a month later, I start having to pay mileage-based user fee, just doesn't seem fair.
I think it's really fair.
Patrick, did you have a comment on this at all? I'm not sure that I followed it entirely.
Yeah, kind of sort of.
Trying to go through the scenario and make sure we understand what.
While you're thinking about that, one concern I had is about the failure to pay with interest. People move, people die. There probably should be an end date on when that stops accumulating the interest. Somebody moves away for 30 years and comes back and gets a bill for X amount. So it's just, I think my comfort level would be shall stop accumulating after a year. Something like that, because they're gonna not be able to register car anyways until it's paid up. But I think that interest rate should have a stop point. So it doesn't continually just go on for somebody really not realizing that. They have to pay it.
Yeah, so the 1.5% per month comes out to 18% per year. So you could say the total amount of interest the total amount of interest on the unpaid amount due pursuant to this section shall not exceed 18%.
Yeah, whatever it is, I think it should be a stop point, because things are gonna get lost in the weeds. People moving, re-registering their car somewhere else and not realizing they have an outstanding balance. I don't know. if
In a collection, you're saying it should.
Yeah, that one
interest
year.
Collection
Yeah.
or accrue
Yeah.
should not exceed 12 months or 18
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
Do you think that the next section about the commissioners, he has the ability to waive or not waive or negotiate? I assume that means he can some or all, so he can negotiate, he or she could negotiate the settlement of that, but you'd like to be more.
It
specific.
depends on what mood he is. Or he or
Yeah,
she
I don't
is.
want it to be based on a mood either, but I mean, you have to have some discretion as a,
Yeah.
but you're saying that with a further guardrail.
Yeah.
That it does not go on accumulating to. I guess it would be quite the situation, right, to come back after being gone 10 years.
Like a library.
I don't know, I would think that somewhere in the regulation it could cover that, or they got covered by the waiver. If there's an accrued for 12 or 18 months, would sit there.
Yeah, until it's paid, because they can't register the car, because we have, they can't, register it.
Yeah.
Go to ledge council for a comment and then to the agency and then back to the committee.
Yeah, I mean, you can put in a cap on the total amount. Another option is to just impose a flat percentage. But then that doesn't deal well with someone who's, only 30 days past due or 60 days past due versus someone who's a year
Yeah, I don't
past
wanna
due.
do that. I just wanna, whatever it is, just it stops at a certain point.
You can go, if your agency wants to comment on that, or while they're looking at the other piece, or do you want another minute? The agency has a comment on whether or not there should be a limit of time frame that the interest should accrue.
I think we're fine with some corrections around. This, wanted to go back to giving a good
Mhm.
run through again what you're saying is the worst case scenario. In our discussion the other day.
Yeah, I was trying to remember where we ended up in that discussion the other day, and I know there is also the scenario where someone can come out up to 11 months ahead on not having mileage-based user fee assessed. But let me pull this back up. Because we were discussing when we had a chance, Logan, Patrick, and I had a chance to meet on Monday afternoon, how the transition would look for the other folks who. So the possibilities here are, if you're completely synced up on registration and inspection, and your registration or inspection is due in January, then it's a wash. You go straight from your EV infrastructure fee to your mileage-based user fee. If you're not completely synced up, so take, for example, a car where your registration is November or December, your inspection is, let's say, June. Then you would have, so if your next registration, you register, renew your registration this November, you get your car inspected in June 2027, that starts your mileage-based mileage-based user fee period. And then you go to the next June, you'll complete a reporting period there. And you'll get the $89 credit towards that reporting period. And then you'll have the 6 months there where, depending on how much mileage you were driving, there's no calculation of mileage. Instead, you've covered that with your EV infrastructure fee, and then you're into your next mileage reporting period. Although this doesn't address to what happens in the second mileage reporting period as far as the EV infrastructure fee goes, now that I think about it. Because you would have paid, your EV infrastructure fee, so $89 a year for the 2 years from November 26th to November 28th. Your first mileage reporting period would be June 27 to June 28, and you'd get an $89 credit against your balance due for the mileage you travel. The language in here doesn't speak to June 28 to June 29. Because you've paid $89 for that period of November 26 to November 28. Or that EV infrastructure period for November 26 to November 28. So the language doesn't address January 27 to through May 27 and June of 28 through November of 28. What are you doing with the EV infrastructure fee for those periods? That could be changed depending on how you want to address it, or you can leave it silent. And
Representative McCoy and then Representative White.
So do we have a sense of how many people would pay 2 years? The minimum, is it a lot of
That's a
people
great
pay 2
question.
years? Do we have a sense? Okay,
We do have a sense, I don't have the number right off.
I mean, is it a lot or is it based on how 8,000 EVs? Is it
It's
6,000? Is it 20?
at 13,000 EVs.
It's good to know.
And I'll have to get you what the
I
actual.
mean, I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because on the flip side, are there people that are like not paying like for a while before it kicks in? So do they balance one another out?
Yeah, I mean, the thought behind all of this was if you have the $89 infrastructure fee, you don't have that initial mileage reporting period. When you first begin, when you go to registration. Then the $89 registration fee would apply to that, and because it was set at a rate that was much lower than what the average vehicle actually travels at, $154 per year. That like the differences in the number of instances where there'd be like a substantial difference is probably pretty small. And even in the example that Damien shared of 11 months, it's $80 or less. It's still about half what people have paid on average for a gas vehicle going 11,000 miles. And then on the flip side, that there also with that decision are sort of giving away some months, but that in the initial transition, it wouldn't be too big of an ask or burden in either direction. I think we're open to language if you want to sort of narrow this down and have some proration schedule where whether it's on a monthly basis or what have you, so that gets applied in a more exact manner with that. What we're trying to do with all of this language and the design of the program to start is to keep it simple. Right? So that we are able to work through things in the next iteration for the rest of the vehicles, right? So I think the agency is open, the department is probably going to be able to prorate in some way. As long as we don't get into a situation like Representative Couch highlighted, where we're sort of, actually issuing refunds, all kinds of refunds.
Right.
That would be a costly administrative task.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a suggestion last week by a committee member to change EV registrations to just 1 year, just during your transition period, so that Because if Damien's scenario were a 1-year registration, not a 2-year, it would just be that much simpler. There'd be a little, you paid your registration fee. You'd get to your inspection. That would start, so you're gonna pay a little bit you'll pay an amount at your second inspection, but you will have paid your $89. So there's some truing up, but it's not, it just might simplify things for the agency.
I mean, I think what we wanted to do was provide sort of all the options that are available to a gas vehicle owner, to an EV owner. So some people do find that, the paying the 2-year registration is preferable, and there is some financial benefit to that. So that's why we didn't entertain the idea of just going to 1-year registration just for this group of vehicles. Because we did hear from committee on fairness of applying EV rules to different vehicle types.
Yeah, I hear, Rep. White, but it's taken a little while to get to the 2-year, to get people used to it, to get it all programmed. And then just to sort of, trim out a little piece just for a year or two, kind of, it just muddies the water. This is gonna be a hard enough thing to explain. What I'm sort of saying is it isn't fair if somebody gets charged the infrastructure fee and they're not able to sort of apply that going forward. And we heard the worst case, what would happen. It just doesn't seem fair. So I think coming up with a way for you could round up or down just to make it really simple. Nobody's gonna argue about 1 month, but I might argue about 11 months of payment that, that sort of says, okay, we're gonna apply the credit, not a check, credit for what's left over in the infrastructure fee as you kick into the mileage-based user fee. Seems like we should put some language in that so that, even if it's only, 250 people, they don't care how many people get caught up in it. They just care about what they've had to pay. And if it seems unfair, if it is unfair, it's hard to argue. There's only a few of you that have to do it. So I would suggest we try to find some language, or Damien find some language in there. Continuing to make it simple, but make sure you credit for what people have already prepaid. And it is a prepayment.
Representative Lau?
Yeah, I think if it's only 250 people, this should be something that we should do. I think we want to make this as frictionless as possible, this transition. So that makes sense to me.
So the question is how you would want to provide that credit. It's, for example, it's fairly easy to draft the language to provide that, electric vehicles shall transition to the mileage-based user fee as follows. At the, next annual inspection for the vehicle will commence its first mileage reporting period. And then for annual inspections or for mileage reporting periods that commence prior to January 1, 2029, those cars would receive a prorated credit, and then how would you prorate it? Would it be by month, quarter, 6-month period?
Yeah, it seems like 5 months would be a good way to do it. And you don't have to cut a month in half by a month.
Okay. Yeah. All right, I can redraft and,
That's what I'm.
yeah,
Yeah, we're fine.
okay. All right,
That puts us back to the capping the interest piece at some spot, and I'm sure that I did hear what the agency's doing on that was.
They said they're fine with it.
where would you like to cap it at?
We're suggesting 12 or an 18 month.
Doesn't matter to me. It should be an endpoint, some
18 months.
pick a number.
Say 12 of agency.
Well,
what we're getting at is the difference between somebody avoiding paying versus somebody that's unknown of. Fact, right?
Well, we would get at them, because when they go re-register a car, they couldn't get those paid. These are just people that have moved or died, or just fall through the cracks, like.
12 months is a reasonable amount of time that the agency
Yeah.
would be able to identify the situation.
Yes.
Anybody else have an opinion on that?
The only thing I'd say is it would be good to do that. We're talking about $186. 18% on 153 gives us that is almost insignificant. You want to put any resources, try to collect that money? I don't think so. So, anyway.
No, but after
Maybe
30 years.
No, I'm not,
Oh, yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
agreeing
Won't
with
be
you.
able to
I'm
re-register
saying the
until
point
they-
is that it gets de minimis and you're just gonna
Oh, yeah,
add
yeah.
up this money that you're just gonna write off.
So the system would be marked in a way that then they wouldn't be able to re-register another vehicle. In fact,
Any vehicle.
Michelle Bodenauer, Vermont Agency of Transportation. So, I think the chair is correct that they're gonna be marked in the system, so when they come next to register a vehicle, this will be an outstanding debt. We're not gonna go out and try and collect these debts at all, but it does kind of put a marker in the system that will that could catch up with that person at the point in time. And then they would owe with an amount that won't be astronomical, but it recognizes the fact that they avoided earlier systems charges.
okay, so does that help guide you?
Yeah, I just want to say this, I'm really grateful that this is before I got to the legislature, but that our state invested in modernizing the DMV system. So this stuff is possible because of that. And presumably there'll be future patches and things that continue that. So just changing needs, changing times, and we're able to adapt and just want to give a shout out to those who were part of that, who were here and part of that.
So what I'm hearing is the maximum amount of interest that could accrue on an unpaid mileage-based user fee would be 18%, the 1-year total interest amount. So I will update that. There are, I'm just looking at the list that I have. There are 3 other outstanding issues in the draft that I forgot to touch on in my walkthrough. The first is there was discussion about the inflator on the annual tax rate. That is on page 7, line 7.
I heard enough. I make a motion just to remove that section. The inflator.
Representative Teaser?
Thanks. So anyway, this is a point of. All right, so I wanted to add some flavor to this thing about fairness, and I'm very concerned about fairness. Everybody should be, and about the inflator. Now, the UVM study, of just background, envisions an inflator, and it's so that we don't get into the same thing, whatever. EVs have been on the road since the late 2000s. So they've been driving on the roads without any contribution since that time. So there's been pardon the pun, but there's been a free ride there. No other class of vehicles has received federal and state tax dollars to be able to buy them. So there's an advantage there. The other thing is that there's been tax dollars provided for the infrastructure for charging and things like that. So there's been an advantage to EVs there. And currently we know, and the law written was for only to recoup the gas tax, the state gas tax. We did get testimony that for every federal dollar from the federal government or that we give into federal government for fuel taxes, we get $1.05 back. So we have been promoting this by not charging the full boat for a long period of time. So just to cause a little bit of problem here, I would have a proposal that we have an inflator. Now, I think that 27% is ridiculous. You'd have to come up with something like that. But that inflator only be applied until it reaches a cap of 0.0218. How'd I come to that? That is including the federal taxes. So we'd cap it at what the gas tax, total gas tax would be, or until such times that an inflator would be applied to motor fuels. I know there's a lot there, but that fairness thing is we've been very fair to EVs and there might be an opportunity there. I'll just throw that out to the group. Don't expect much support. That's my suggestion.
Representative Burke?
Well, I'd have to consider those more in detail, but just speaking to the other side. First of all, there were studies done that said that IV trans said they did not want to start taxing EVs until they represented 15% of the fleet. And not even quite there yet, I think, but it's close. So that's why we started with the infrastructure fee. And I think EV owners are very happy to contribute. But I think it's also, and this is something that can't be really quantified, but that the air quality benefits of EVs are very strong, and you can't. I mean, somebody might be able to quantify what that is, but we know that asthma, people are really affected by the particulate in internal combustion engines. So maybe some savings in healthcare costs. Just,
Both sides.
yeah.
Representative Pouch and then Representative White.
Yeah, I can appreciate the argument there. Let's be clear, EV owners, and I've been one probably since when they first came out, haven't had to pay because the legislature didn't do anything to make them pay. So there was no way I could pay anyways. EV owners have paid what they've been asked to pay. It was a policy of the state to wait for 15% for a number of other reasons. And I would argue the 1.4, the 0.014 rate, which is the equivalent of a vehicle getting 26 miles per gallon, is already a pretty good compromise. Because I would argue my EV and all EV vehicles are getting a higher, a more efficient rate than that. So I think that that's been a big give, and I've gone with it because it is. I agree that these vehicles need to pay it. It's at the time now we need to start doing it, but we haven't not done it because the state hasn't asked us for it, and the federal government hasn't either. But at some point, you would hope they would. I hope they do. And the amount that of federal gas tax that EVs aren't paying is not changing the amount of money we get from the federal government. So I would say I'd go along with the proposal to remove the inflator.
Representative White.
Yeah, thank you. So, Representative Keiser, I appreciate your proposal. I was unclear about your reference to the Vermont gas tax and getting $1.05 back from the federal government for the gas tax. I'm not quite sure what.
Well, we had testimony a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, that made the same point, and it was described that for every dollar of collected federal gas tax, we get about $5 back. But regardless, I mean, that's.
I'm sorry, I should have interrupted, my bad. We're we get back more money than we send in.
I think that's
the.
that's the point.
As a state on a bigger picture of gas tax board, federal highway, we get more back than we send in.
Yes, okay, yes, thank you for clarifying that. I would be in support of putting language in this that said that we would add an inflator to the MBUF, at the same time we add an inflator to the gas tax. Otherwise, I would not support an inflator.
Representative Burke?
Just one other thing is that the federal gas tax, which is ridiculous, has not been raised since, what? I mean, whose fault is that? You know, and all the money that we could have been getting for the highway trust fund and things.
Thanks for listening.
Other comments? I think that in the testimony, it was pretty clear that an escalator related to inflation, whether it be CPI or construct, but some other piece, was pretty clear from the UVM testimony that is good public policy to have an escalator. I think that would lend the conversation to, could go in all kinds of different directions in terms of fees and user fees that, and this is a user fee that we are implementing. There's a lot of this clear testimony that having it set would be good, but I think we're also recognizing that we inherited a situation that getting to fairness is an incredible challenge. So, is there anybody else that wants to speak on it? There is a motion. I think what we normally do here is a thumbs up or thumbs down. The motion is to remove the escalator from the language. All those in favor of removing it, put the thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that would, those that would want to leave it, would leave 3 the other way. We would instruct the council to take it out. We have, that was 1, you got 2 more.
Yeah. Lynn, can you please make me a co-host again?
It's not a
So
recorded vote. Unless you look really close at YouTube.
the next piece in here is also related to the actual MBUF rate. It's not actual text in the draft. It occurred to me as I was editing the draft that there is currently no provision in here that allows a person to appeal the amount of their assessment. So if they think the commissioner made a mistake or the agency department made a mistake in the assessment, there's no provision in here that allows them to go back to the agency to say, I think you made a mistake, my mileage was this, and you have it as that, or something like that, without going to court. So the only appeal process is to Superior Court. So there's no administrative process. So I wanted to highlight that. It was something that I didn't catch in the draft until the last revision round. Typically, we offer an administrative process so folks don't have to go to court and deal with court filings and back and forth if it's a simple math error or something like that.
Was there?
So this process exists if you think you were overcharged for purchase and use sales or any of that, right? You have an administrative process where you can say, at least get to say your piece. And what you're saying is that doesn't exist across the board. It has to be in the statute. You follow this process if you have a problem.
Right. We typically establish a process to do that. So, for example, with motor vehicle purchase and use tax, we provide that. Let's see. Hold on. sorry, I can't find the language, but we typically provide a process for an individual to contest or appeal the amount of tax assessed, and then for the commissioner to set up a simplified review of that rather than a full court hearing or something like that.
This language in this bill that's proposed, it's on page 9, that says notice an opportunity for a hearing. So that's the kind of language I assume you would have.
Yeah, that's for a suspension.
Right.
You're taking away, so under the constitutional due process requirements, when you're going to take away a right that someone has, or has been granted, you need to offer. So this is a little bit different. There we go. So under the gas tax, a distributor may, within 15 days after an assessment, basically notify the commissioner that they're contesting the amount of the assessment and then have a hearing. And then it goes on beyond that, but there are different provisions like this where you provide basically a 15-day period or something like that, a reasonable amount of time for an individual to contest the amount of the assessment and then have it reviewed by the commissioner at that point. And then after the commissioner's decision, if they still are in disagreement, they could choose to file a court action. But that.
We're gonna go over there. We're gonna get a color.
I think that, going from, a commissioner's decision on the action, it would go then to the hearing unit, not to the court. I think we
Yeah.
want to keep this as simple as possible, and so I don't know if there are any other, I would assume there's an example somewhere in DMV law that gets you to
Yeah.
the hearing officer. And then after the hearing officer, then you get to go to court if you want to. So I just would suggest maybe we could cut and paste from some other part of statute that addresses this issue.
I'm sure there is, and I just forgot to make a note of which section.
Just a walk on it, but
I was wondering if we were ready for a motion to direct our ledge council to
we got one more
provide.
to keep.
Oh, we're wrapping them all in. Okay.
I think we have, I'm sorry, to put the whole end, but we're gonna ask him to he's got one more area that he said we need to revisit.
Well, I was just specifically towards this issue. I was
Oh.
just wondering if we were ready to wrap this one up in a bow, this particular issue of the hearing process.
I think if that's why we would be instructing them to, if we all agree, I guess, and we want to instruct them to add this piece, I guess. Yes, I guess.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I guess we are looking for that.
Just moving things along.
So yes, we want to, Representative Lally is suggesting that we agree that we want to put a hearing process in place.
Absolutely.
And I would say that probably generally speaking, we were at the spot where we would instruct our ledge council to bring us back additional. We're gonna have to look at the whole thing again. When we come back at 1:15, we have to go through the whole.
1:15.
We have permission to, you would have to be on the floor, but we have permission to meet this afternoon, not on the floor. I think we're gonna have to have a situation where we monitor, because there are perhaps some bills that people need to be at. But we need to continue to push through, and the speaker has given us permission to work on the bill at 1:15. You would have to individually make a decision about which part you need to be at. We still have mileage-based user fee and at least 2 other items that we look to move on.
Well, so far I'm in agreement with that, Bob, so.
Okay. Representative Burke,
Are we?
you got one more MBUF.
And then
To bring up another issue.
the final provision in the MBUF that we began to touch on, I think, a couple weeks ago, but never came back to, is what I'll pull up now, the proceedings to recover unpaid amounts. And so there is this section 4309, which provides that the commissioner can So currently it provides that if you haven't paid your amounts due, the commissioner can refuse to renew your license or your registration on that vehicle. The proceedings to recover unpaid amounts here would also allow for civil enforcement action, so going to Superior Court to recover the unpaid amounts, filing a tax lien under subsection B, and also utilizing private collection agencies under subsection C. These are, again, were all taken from the gas and diesel fuel tax, where you're talking about different amounts. But it's a point for discussion and you'll want to hear from the agency, but you started discussion and never finished.
So from our perspective, all right, so the person, first of all, is not gonna be able to become registered. And after that, I don't know that the interests of the state are served by pursuing that person any further beyond the fact that they can't get their car registered. They're gonna have other legal implications for being an unregistered vehicle. The amount of money that might be left on the table would be nominal compared to the processes described here. So I don't think that we would want to include any additional steps unless there was a legal reason we had to.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it feels like this was after distributors, you know, who are, and it'd be like anybody who has to pay their sales tax or any of that from a store. These are individuals. I'm not sure if there's anything like this in any other DMV fee sort of approach. So applying this language to a DMV fee seems out of context. And I would say we strike that. We already have a stick. This thing here it's a hammer that nobody will use because it costs too much to swing it.
Make a motion to remove section A, B, and C. C.
You were agreeing with all three of those sections.
Yeah, that's what you were saying.
I think, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, okay, I want to make sure you're.
You don't renew the registration and then after that,
Everybody good with that? Okay. Judge council's instructed accordingly. Are there other issues? That was all three of them?
That's it for the remaining things I had on my list.
Okay, so we need to break for lunch. We're gonna come back at 1:15. 1 o'clock, but I don't know if that gives Damian quite enough time to work on the piece. He's working through lunch on the updates. We will still be under markup, the opportunity to represent Burke. I suspect that perhaps Drive Electric would come up. That's the first topic on 1:15. So those of you be aware that we'll let the other two members know at 1:15, we're gonna take up potentially Drive Electric about moving an activity into the bill. And I know that Representative Wells may or may not be looking to move something else. I'm not aware of anything else that anybody's bringing to the table.
We had a vote right after we came back from break that sort of, I wish I had just said, I'm not really sure what we're voting on, and I wasn't really clear, and I wish we could have heard from the league again, and so I don't know whether that was on the, I voted in favor, but if that means that I can.
It was a straw poll, tell people that you voted against.
Anyway, I would just, I just need some more, I just need some more time to figure that out and maybe have a, I don't know how other people feel about it. It's what,
This was on the local option tax.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are gonna be back at 1:15. We can reopen
I
up.
just wanted to bring that up. It doesn't have to happen exactly this afternoon, but I just didn't want anything to go beyond that.
Like, I don't know if there's gonna be discussion about Drive Electric or not, you know, bring that up, but. Man, I have no clue. I don't wanna bring, but you were just saying things to discuss.
Well,
Shall I bring it up?
when we come, you know what, that's up to you. I'm saying at 1:15, we're gonna be back at markup, which will certainly include mileage-based user fee. I have been mentioned that there may be another one item from somebody else that you may or may not have something you wish to bring up. I wanted to say, we are not at a spot that would be closed out because
Yeah.
then we'll still have to go through the entire bill.
Maybe a motion to reconsider or something.
Oh, I'm not sure. I guess you could let me know what you're thinking there and we'll go from.
It just happened very fast and you all had this sort of huddle over there and all of a sudden I wasn't really sure. what we were gonna do.
Okay. We can
I
talk
wish
about
I
that.
had stopped it at the time, but I didn't.